3, 2, 1, go. 5 seconds.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mike Haber, and we welcome you to episode number 17 of At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. Off to my side is Edward Martinez, my co-host, and down below us we have a special guest with us, Marc Morris, who is my trial partner. For many years, we've been trying cases together. My very dear friend, confidant, part-time, father confessor.
Pretty much the only person other than me who will talk to you. So let's be honest.
Well, hey Ed, I went through some of my notes and just things. I have never tried a case with anybody else. When I was with the government, I had to try. You know how it is. You try with who you have to try it with. But in private practice, in all my years, I haven't tried a case with anybody but Michael.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry for you, Mark. I'm really sorry for that.
Nobody. So there you go.
So let me just tell the folks a little bit about Marc, because they've heard so much about Ed and I, they're probably choking on their own vomit. But Marc, like Ed, started his career at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. Although unlike Ed, Marc started a lot earlier, and his career started under Janet Reno as opposed to Kathy Rundle. He spent several years with the state, and also very much like Ed, he left the state as a specialty prosecutor in the narcotics division. Went into private practice, and that's when Marc and I started trying cases together. After a spell, he took a little vacay from the law and then went back into public practice, albeit at this time with the Public Defender's Office under Carlos Martinez. Marc left the PD's office with a special assignment to what's called the Capital Litigation Unit, meaning the worst of the worst. He really had the absolute toughest cases that come through the PD's office sitting on his desk. And for the last 8 or 10 years, Marc has been back in private practice, which is our blessing. And as Marc said, he and I have tried many cases together, going back to the early 90s, well, mid 90s.
Mike, but is it considered trying a case when you're carrying his briefcase?
Yeah, that too. Sure, as long as I'm there, it's trying a case.
Ed, you know as well as I do, you cannot do a trial by yourself. Client control has got to be one of the most important things going on. Optics, what's the jury doing? Who's saying this behind your back? I don't trust anybody else. Real quick, guys, for my TikTok followers that are coming in, they're sort of they're wandering into the room here. I wanted to tell my TikTok friends and family that this is a jerry-rigged technology situation here, but I hope it works. You're looking at Michael Haber and Edward Martinez. They are two criminal defense attorneys in Miami who I know very well. Michael I've been partners with for years. I'm a guest on their show right now, which is on, what is it, Facebook Live, guys? If somebody wanted to watch you through what, StreamYard? Is that what? How do they find you?
It's Miami's community newspaper on Facebook.
Right now, the show is being broadcast live on Facebook, but you've got to go to Miami's community newspapers page. After the show is over, it'll be republished on all of our pages, plus on YouTube.
Okay, so I'll give that to you folks, and also that you can watch any live broadcast that I do for up to 90 days. But thanks for coming in. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about some more stories that we've had over the years in Miami, that being some of the craziest, wildest, nutso, scariest cases. And we were trying to go over a few of them last night, but we decided, let's just throw it out there today. And Mike can pick one of his favorites. I can pick one of mine. And Ed can put some of his, because Ed, I'm sure you had a few beauties, and you still do, as we do. But let's face it, the late 80s, early 90s in Miami brought forth many very interesting cases. Oh, yeah. So, all right, so folks, look, enjoy. I'm going to try to answer some, hey, Tommy, I'm going to try to answer some questions for you. I'll turn around. But just right now, just listen, have fun. And if you like stories, some of these have been media cases. Some of these have gotten lost, swept under the carpet over the years. But let's do it, guys. Where do we start?
Let's start with a media case, since you just went there. I'll give you the moniker, and you can run with some facts if you want. Almighty King sees. Almighty King sees.
Yeah, I knew you were going to start with this one. This is a rough one. This was a really bad one because it involved a child. Okay, and anytime you have a case that involves violence in a child, your client becomes obviously public enemy number one. You become public enemy number two because you were standing next to public enemy number one. But and that's what we're talking about right now is pre-internet days. So the only news that was out there was two forms of news in Miami. There was your local news, both in English and Spanish. And you had the Miami Herald, both in English and Spanish. And I think that was pretty much it in 1995, Mike? 1996?
Mid-90s.
Okay, so everything that anybody was devouring back then, you couldn't go on Instagram, you couldn't go on the internet, you couldn't go on Facebook, you couldn't get any news, you couldn't get any discussion of any of these cases. So whatever was written in the newspaper, that was what was going on.
Right. And this was one hell of a newsworthy case. It got an awful lot of press because, as Mark said, it wasn't just involving a child. It was involving a dead baby, 2-year-old that unfortunately took a piece of shrapnel from a shotgun round that was fired during a bout of gang violence in a public park in the middle of the day.
It was a gang shootout. It was a gang shootout, and there was crossfire going across a city park. This was going on. This was the Latin Kings, and I forgot the rival group at that time, some local, these gangs went block by block pretty much back then, but the Latin Kings were very well known. Our client was a Latin King, and that was a really controversial trial because the state really went too far to try to get. First of all, our client's not the one that nobody got hit by one of our client's gunshots. That's not to excuse any of his behavior whatsoever. But the shooter that ended up shooting the child ended up testifying on behalf of the government in this trial against our client.
They basically immunized him. He was originally the first person arrested, the shooter, but they wound up cutting him free in order to go after our client.
And they knew he was the shooter.
They knew he was the shooter. Yes.
Oh, it was a shotgun versus a 38. There was no question about who was shooting who. It was bizarre, and our client almost bled to death too. He was on life support. The Third District Court of Appeals, which is the appellate court that handles all the different Miami, out of Dade County and Monroe County. Any cases there that go for your initial state appeal go to the Third DCA. The Third District Court of Appeals. At the time, Judge Alan Schwartz, Ed, you know him well. Mm-hmm. This guy wrote a seething opinion criticizing the government for basically flipping the murderer. Okay.
Mark, I didn't know you were in narcotics. We were in narcotics. Like, that's one of our basic premises. We don't flip the big fish onto the little one.
Ever.
We flip the little one onto the big one. Like, well,
but here's why it happened in this case, Ed. Initially, our guy was shot with the same shotgun that shot this baby and the baby's aunt, who was, when the round started going off, that the civilians in the park took off scurrying. Obviously, they were running for their lives. And so this poor woman was the aunt of this 2-year-old, and she had been strolling him through the park. She hears the shot. She grabs the child out of the stroller, cradles him in her arms, and takes off running. She takes a piece of shrapnel in the back of her hand, and the baby takes one in the back, which winds up killing him. So what happens is our guy also takes a bunch of shotgun pellets. He's riddled with them, his whole backside. And he gets away leaving a blood trail. Ultimately, he winds up in the hospital, and he's treated as a victim. He never tells the police that he was the first guy that fired the first shot that triggered this whole gang shootout. So nobody knew that until well after the fact. Our guy was first hailed in the Miami Herald as being a hero because he's the guy who, escaped from the park and yada, yada. But ultimately, when the facts started to come out after the news media had been brought into the false narrative, I guess the state attorney's office was pissed off. And so rather than going after both guys equally culpable, they decided it was strategically more important for them to go after our guy and give the other man a pass. Mark, I may be wrong about this, but I think the shooter was on.
Honestly, they
Wasn't
could have
he
put them
on
on trial together, and they would have gotten
Right.
convictions on all of them.
Wasn't he on probation too, to make matters worse? The guy with the shotgun was on probation at the time.
I don't know. The guy with the shotgun whose blast ended up, murdering a child and going through the hand of the aunt who took the child to the park. He only ended up doing a year in county with probation.
That was right before they dropped the charges.
Again, and that's when the appellate court, I've never seen an appellate court go off on a prosecutor and question her motives and it was a transferred intent theory.
Wow.
I mean, Alan Schwartz went off. And in fact, years later, he was covering a courtroom and I had to go sidebar. I didn't think he knew me from Adam. And I went sidebar and I was talking to him and he asked me, he goes, were you the attorney on the Cesar Reyes case? And I said, yes, I was. He goes, oh, okay, very interesting. I remember that case very well. And I looked at him and I said,
here's something for the audience to know. It's just like we like to throw out some pro tips. And it's happened to me where I had a judge reversed once. I get along with him great. We're good friends. But you're in trouble as a prosecutor or a judge or anything if the third DCA reverses it and attacks you personally or says things like, in my case, where they reversed him on 3 things and said, and by the way, had the state appealed these other 2 issues that they didn't appeal, we would have reversed you on that too. That's when they're pissed.
Have you ever, Ed, in your career, have you ever had a case of transferred intent?
No.
You ever tried it? So this is the first time.
It's not a criminal theory.
No, never. I wouldn't do it.
This is the first time that we went through that, and it really was a truly ugly case. And it's just another example of truly, honestly, just another day in the life. Right? You got a couple of knuckleheads in rival gangs in the wrong place at the wrong time, and one of them looks at the other one the wrong way, and bam, shots are getting fired, and then you've got innocents, caught in the crossfire.
Yep, happens all the time, man. And they got to stop that.
It doesn't happen as much now as it used to. It used to be just a complete epidemic.
Thank God, but it still happens more than it should, Mark. Really?
Oh, absolutely. What drive-bys with people with innocents getting hit?
Parks and shootings.
One is too many times. I'm just saying that I remember back. It was in the early '90s, mid '90s. It just seemed like every time you were opening up the paper, people were taking bullets.
And they were using the Mini Ruger rifles back then. That was the weapon of choice, the Mini Rugers.
That was after the Saturday night specials. Okay, and by the way, for all of you gun-toting Southerners out there, there's a song by Leonard Skinner called Saturday Night Special where they talk about handgun control. So just have a listen to that song.
Don't be dating yourself.
Not that I'm in any way questioning the Second Amendment here, but I just thought it was very interesting to hear Leonard Skinner talk about a gun that they said the only thing it was good for was putting a man 6 feet in the ground, Ed. Okay? Well, there you go. Let's talk about the Bahamas, Mike. Let's talk about drug trafficking.
It's better in the Bahamas. So drug trafficking in the Bahamas. So let's go back to the early to mid 90s when I get a call from somebody in an unnamed island in the Bahama chain who's got a fugitive warrant for narcotics trafficking here in the Southern District of Florida. And again, this is pre-internet, this is pre-Zoom, this is pre-FaceTime. We had cell phones, but they weren't smartphones. They were just basically, I don't even know if you could text on them back then.
The thing was bigger than the Beverly Hills bottle.
Right, and they were like bricks, but not the kind of bricks that we're talking about with our trafficker friends. So we had to go to the Bahamas and physically talk to this gentleman.
Wait, Mike, but you got to back this up because remember we get the call to check these boats out that the serial numbers are off. They've been seized. They're drug runner boats. They're go fast boats. And that's what we were originally hired on to see if we could get these boats back out of seizure. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
They were seized down at Black Point, and then they were brought up. And I didn't know much about this. Mike knew more about the boats, Ed, and all that stuff. But the guy that was going to handle the finances comes into our offices. Mike, I don't know if you remember this, but he comes into my office and introduces himself first as a guy that works for the guy. Okay, the guy meaning the guy in the Bahamas that's footing the bills. They can't come to the United States. That's he's the guy. So this is like his lieutenant, apparently, that comes to Miami to make sure, hey, okay, we want to pay the lawyers. This is what we need you to do. This is who you listen to. This is who you don't. Okay, that's fine. How you doing? Nice to meet you. I introduced him to Mike. That part's over. We're trying to get these boats back. But then what Mike is talking about happens, and we have to go to Bimini. And back then, and I don't know if any of you watching remember the what were the boats? The chalks. Boats that took off and landed on water. Now, what happened in Miami at some point that crashed and the company went out of business? What year was that,
Yes.
Mike?
I could look it up, but it was around that time. It wasn't too far beyond that.
All right, well, we're talking again pre 9/11. So getting onto Chalks, the boat that takes off in the water and it would land in the Bahamas right in the water. There was no metal detectors. There was maybe one customs agent if he was paying attention and not having lunch or whatever. Hey, guys, going to Bahamas? All right, have a good time. It was literally like that.
And also you have to remember back at that time, a lot of people think about Bimini who talk about Bimini today don't understand what Bimini was back then. Back then, there was like maybe 2-3-story hotels, and the only restaurants were people's houses that served food.
Yeah.
A couple of marinas, and that was it. There was nothing else there. Gas station, a boat ramp, and a Chalks landing facility, and a lot of swamp. It wasn't built up like it is today. There were no casinos, resorts, nothing like that.
Yeah, it was a dead island. It was a perfect island to drug traffic off of, or to use as your point to get to South Florida.
Everybody that was in the drug trade was using Bimini.
Well, then you have an idea that the guy that we were dealing with was multi-generational. He had dealt with, his Colombian friends back in the day, and this was a route that's just been used over and over again. So, of course, Mike and I, we land in Bimini, and we get off the Chalks plane, and we're the only two white guys there, number one, and we're the only two guys that look like lawyers there because Mike's got his fucking briefcase, right? Okay, we're in the Bahamas, and we're there to do business, obviously. So we get picked up. It was like a Jeep, Mike, or something. These guys like get in the back. All right, where we go.
It was like an F-150. It was like an F-150. It was an extended cab pickup. So you and I were sitting in the back. There were two guys in the front, and then there were a bunch of guys in the cab behind us.
Right. It was like
and this is early. And it was early morning, Mark. We got there at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. We landed really early.
We weren't given any specific instructions, basically, when we got there.
We're just told we'd be picked up. So they picked us up on a
golf cart.
It was like a ferry. But they took us to a boat that ferried us from North Bimini to South Bimini, and that's when we got in that extended pickup.
Right, but we were also in a boat. Listen, the bottom line is we got moved and traded about 3, 4. I'm thinking to myself, I could see this. If he's a fugitive, we just want to make sure we're followed. I don't know.
There was a point.
They fucking choppers.
There was a point where Mark leaned over to me to give you a visual. There's a point where he leaned over to me and said, "We're going to be buried here, and no one's ever going to find us." We were literally in swamp.
Well, that's after that. We go into this warehouse. Like those prefab aluminum places that churches build for excess congregation. Those things? You see them down in Homestead. They had one built there in South Bimini.
In the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere, because underneath this, they were working on boats. I mean, beautiful.
And planes.
They had a plane in there. So they bring Mike and I in there, and they don't tell us, hey, someone's going to be right with you. Hey, can I get you a cup of coffee? No, none of that bullshit. Guys are working, and they're working on with it. Nobody's really looking at us. Maybe there's how no one really looks at you, but everybody knows that you're there.
Right.
So we're standing there, and 1 minute goes by, and I say to Mike, "Hey, Mike, I think they're going to kill us. I'm pretty sure that they're going to kill us." And Mike's like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Listen, whatever we do, let's just not go down like bitches right here, okay? Let's just stand up like men. Let's take it, and there's no reason for them to torture us. So I just see quick."
Why did you think they were going to kill you? You guys are their lawyers. They're not going to kill you yet.
Because nobody had told. Ed, no one had told us anything. We were just following instructions to get from point A to point B, but we were running around.
Right.
It was
feel right.
I remember. I don't know if you remember, Mark. Well, I'm sure you. How could you forget? I mean, they picked us up, and so we get in the vehicle, the first truck that they're driving us before we get to the hangar, and these guys pull out these joints that are like the size of Cuban cigars.
Oh yeah,
And
we'll get to that.
Yeah, everybody's got their own joint. The windows are closed. It's a total clam bake inside of this vehicle. We're contact high by the time we get to the thing. In fact,
That's why you thought they were going to kill you. You were paranoid.
Little paranoid.
That was
Go
good
ahead,
stuff
Mark.
they were smoking. That was good
So
shit they were smoking.
So we're waiting in there, and all of a sudden, the guy comes from around the boats, and he comes over to me, and it's the same guy that was in my office that day that introduces himself as somebody else. He came to the United States illegally to check out what was going on here, who the lawyers were. Smart guy, risked a hell of a lot. I mean, his story is a whole nother show for you guys. But so he's like, hey, I'm sorry to make you wait. My mom's gonna make us lunch or whatever it is, and I'm sitting there, holy shit, man! I thought you were gonna kill us. He goes, no, why would I kill you? I don't need to kill you guys yet. You guys smoke some of my buddy's dope? I mean, we're not gonna waste good dope on you guys. I mean, we kill you before you're gonna smoke our dope. Whatever you want to do. All right. So I learned a lot that day from this guy. I learned a lot from that whole operation. I learned that basically he was the Robin Hood, or would you call that, of Bimini? I mean, he was establishing fresh water, like communications towers for the island. This guy was untouchable in Bimini. You know, you're not going to go there and extradite him to the United States because the Bahamians are not going to let you have him. And that ended up being a really good relationship. He took us out fishing that day too, Mike. Remember that?
I'll tell you another thing that we learned.
Some
about
guy, some captain he had, took us out on some crazy ass boat fish.
I'll tell you
Beautiful.
another thing we learned that day that was an experience that I hadn't had before that time. We learned that you cannot travel with more than 10,000 cash each internationally without declaring it.
No, that was before. This was before that law. Was this before?
No, that was still in effect, man. He loaded us up with cash, and we had a problem because we didn't want to bring it back. I mean, these were the days. This is what was going on back then.
I was like the scarecrow, man. I was stuffed. I was like the scarecrow walking, but there was Watson Island. There was one customs agent there, and the guy was sleeping when the plane came in. He could not give a shit about anything. Could have brought a dead body out, and the customs guy wouldn't have even looked. All right. What guys party over there? All right.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda. The reality was we learned pretty quickly what we were how far we were willing to go, and what we were not willing to do.
Right.
We also learned that there are end arounds to absolutely every problem if you're creative enough.
I think the funniest war story I have that relates to marijuana happened to me in county. I don't know if I told this story on this show before. I might have told it on one of my other shows. Stop me, Michael, if I told it, or if maybe I'll tell it again for everybody who's listening. Mark, I'm in county court as a prosecutor. I speak Spanish. The judge was Ivan Hernandez. Remember Ivan Hernandez?
Oh, yeah.
He speaks Spanish. We've got a Cuban defendant who's about 70 years old. And the court reporter, who I forget her name, but she's a wonderful woman. She's a beautiful, wonderful human being. And it's arraignment. So the guy got charged with possession of marijuana because they caught him smoking in a park. At least that's what the cop says. So I get up, it's arraignment, and it's like, yeah, judge, there's arraignment for the defendant. And the guy gets up, she translates. The judge says, sir, he was pro se. How do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? He translates, and he in Spanish says, what? Oh, no, fuck it, I'm guilty. I did it. But she doesn't translate it, right? Because she realizes he's admitting on the record he did it. So the judge kind of smirks and giggles. I'm trying to keep a straight face. And he says, no, sir. You don't understand the question. Let me do it again. Does it again. Guy again says, no. What do you mean? Of course I understood it. I understood the question perfectly. I fucking smoked and I did it. And I'm going to fucking do it again anytime I want. So I'm sitting at the podium and people in the gallery are already giggling. And I'm figuring, okay, I'm a young prosecutor. I got to be a prosecutor. But I don't want to do this to this old man. Let me maybe scare him into understanding he should say not guilty. So I say, Your Honor, for the record, I speak Spanish. I know you understand Spanish. The translator obviously understands Spanish. And we got to be honest, Your Honor. The translator needs to translate what this man is saying. However, And I figure I'm going to get pissed. I'm going to be the angry prosecutor. I said, however, I need this defendant, and I need you to translate this clearly. He needs to understand that not only what he says right now in court, in open court, can be used against him. I will absolutely use everything this man says in open court against him. So the judge does it again. He goes, I don't give a shit. I smoke pot. I'm 70 years old, and I'm not going to stop smoking pot. I don't give a shit what happened in this court today. I'm going to keep smoking pot. I just look at everybody.
What judge was this at?
Huh?
Ivan Hernandez.
Ivan Hernandez.
Oh, was Ivan?
Remember? So now Ivan is cracking up. Ivan can't even control himself anymore. He's got a shit-eating grin from ear to ear. The translator just doesn't even know what to say, so she starts translating it. So now everybody, because before it was only the Spanish speakers that were laughing. Now everybody's cracking up, and I just couldn't do it. I was just like, Your Honor, in reviewing the A form again, at this point, I think the state is just, we have no choice but to null process. What am I going to do? The guy who's 70 years old, he's like, I'm going to keep smoking. I just freaking null process.
He shouldn't have been arrested to begin with, but hey, that's another story too.
Brother, but that's, listen, you want to talk about war stories? As a prosecutor, how many times, Mark, did you see something as a prosecutor that you're sitting there at your desk thinking, how did these guys even have the balls to arrest somebody with this?
Well, that's why becoming a prosecutor got harder and harder, especially narcotics, when your snitches are worse than the guys that you're prosecuting.
But you know what I loved, Mark, that I was able, look, I'll give you another story quickly. I take over for somebody else who was in my unit, somebody who I did not approve. You know how the system works, right? So the audience quickly understands when you're a prosecutor, you're a pit prosecutor, but to be in a special unit, you basically have to apply for the job. And you go through an interview process, and all the people that work in the unit are the ones that choose whether or not you come in. So we might have 10 applicants, and then we all sit down together, and everybody says who they want to choose. So this one guy came in. I did not like him because I knew he was unethical. I knew he had been caught doing something unethical when he was in the pits. And I'm very big on that. I don't care about personally whether I like you or not, but as a prosecutor, I wanted you to be ethical and good. Personal relationship had nothing to do with it. So I didn't vote for the guy. I was like, I'm not taking him. And I told everybody the story, but everybody else chose him. All right. He had the case. He quits. So now our division chief spreads out the cases. I get one of his cases that have been forever. And you know some of these parties. Susie Ribeiro Ayala was representing one. It was like 7 co-defendants. Susie was representing one. What's this guy's name? Manny, I forget his last name now. He was basically some really good lawyers. And they have been pushing for depots and pushing for depots. And the previous prosecutor was giving all kinds of excuses why depositions were not being able to be taken. And when I get it, the 11th hour, they try to take depots. I said, no, I'm not taking, you're not taking depots. You haven't cleared with my schedule. Let me get my schedule ready. Now I attend all my depots. So we go in front of the judge. And before we go in front of the judge, I said, let me look at this case. I don't know anything about the case. The cops were doing surveillance on a boat that was, on a trailer. And they were watching, and they got video. They're taking video, right? And you see 7 or 8 guys coming in and out of the boat. And the story was that they were going to go fishing, and they had like little fishing rods like you give to like children, like little princess fishing rods. And
you mean like the one I play with my cat with?
Yeah, look, come on.
Yeah, they're catching bait, Ed.
Right. So I'm like, okay, this is clearly bullshit. These guys are not fishing. And they're prepping the boat. Then they take out on the road, and it was dusk. Now, the reason for the stop, this is important for you guys and for the audience to understand. The cops couldn't just stop them because they didn't see anything other than something that was kind of, if you've been doing this for a couple of years, you know that this looks suspicious, but they don't have a reason to stop the boat or the trailer. Their reason for the stop was that they ran a stop sign. You with me? Okay. That they just took a stop sign. All right, so I'm looking at the video. Sure enough, here comes the truck and leaves. Here comes the boat. It's dusk, so it's a little bit dark. They're on video. They get to the stop sign, and I almost got blinded by the fucking stoplights of the trailer. Like on their own video.
They came to a complete stop.
That they're full of shit, and they're lying for the reason for the stop, right?
That's called pretextual, Ed.
You think? So now I get to the courtroom, and now I see why all these defense lawyers were just foaming at the mouth for that depot. And it was Christina Pereira Schubiner. Remember Christina Pereira Schubiner?
Of course.
Great judge. And she knew, I'd already been in narcotics for several years, so she knew me. I came in, and she says, Mr. Martinez, depots, blah, blah, blah. I said, Judge, before we go there, can we just pass this? I want to talk to everybody in the jury room. I go in the jury room. You know how they start yelling at us when we're prosecutors? And stop. I know exactly why you guys want to take the depots. Here's the deal. I'll no-pros everybody except one person, or I'll no-pros everybody, and I'm going to do what they should have done in the first place. When they did the stop, they found that the boat had been altered, and somebody had built a secret compartment, and they had found about 50, 60 bricks of pot in the boat. But the boat had been redone. This was a custom job that somebody built a secret compartment in the hull. So I look and I said, here's what it'll do. I'm going to no-pros everybody except, because I knew the owner of the boat was like a 70-year-old lady. I looked that up before I went to court that day. I said, I'm going to no-pros everybody except for who's the relative of the 70-year-old lady. They're like, what? I go, yeah, don't bullshit me. No 70-year-old lady did that. But I'm sure one of the guys on the boat is related to the 70. And Susie looks at me and goes, that would be my client. It's his aunt. I go, okay, come here, Susie. I said, the rest of you leave. I'm going to no-pros you. I said, your client's going to take 3 years probation because I can't prove this, but he's got a set of balls like this to use his aunt to transport marijuana. And I no-pros him. But here's the story. How do these cops not, and how many times have we seen now that we've got body worn, right? How many times have we seen cops do stuff? And I'm like, do they not know they're on video?
Ed, I had a case where on the show, the first 48, was that the show?
Yeah, that was a show.
These guys searched the vehicle of the subject without a warrant. They did it right on the TV show. So all I had to do is get the. You didn't have to ask the producers. It was on the actual episode where they even say, "All right, let's go. Let's go open." And
dude, I don't get it.
That was one of the reasons why they don't do first 48 in Miami anymore, because these guys were making some serious mistakes, during the filming of the show. The producers don't have to turn that over, but when they do show something on TV, that's etched in stone. Mike, the other case I was thinking about last night, and I guarantee Ed's never had one of these before, something that we're dealing with right now, the Lacey Act.
Yeah,
okay?
I haven't had
one.
one.
People are watching here, but this is the first case I've ever had. I had a short hearing on part of it this morning, and I had to explain to the judge this case is about blood pythons and other types of reptiles being exported, possibly illegally or trafficked, or And you know what? The judge really didn't want to hear a lot of that. The judge just wanted to hear when the case would be ready and what needed to be done to get rid of it, because nobody really cares about snakes that much, Ed.
No.
Except for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of Miami, and a particular prosecutor there who is tracking our guy like the guy that killed his girlfriend. I mean, this
for snakes.
He won't even let the guy surrender. Okay, now for those watching, a lot of times it's very simple. You tell the police, the detective, the lead, you want to come. If you want to arrest our guy, we will provide him to you. We will bring him to you. And what that does is two things. Well, it guarantees the safety of everybody involved, police officers included. Anything can happen when you're driving to serve a warrant or to arrest somebody. It doesn't even have to be with your particular client. That's number one.
It's just as much for the government's protection as it is for the benefit of the client.
It's just nobody needs to be kicking down doors or having Action Jackson or paying overtime and doing all this other shit to a guy that breeds snakes. Okay? You don't need that. But this prosecutor told Mike, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, he doesn't negotiate surrenders. Okay. This is the guy
unless you're a cooperating witness, then they'll talk to you.
I'm not saying. Look, we all need environmental protection from crimes because we all enjoy the same wildlife, and we all enjoy. I don't think anybody disagrees. Oil spills, all that shit, that's a problem. But a couple of snakes. Well, I should say a couple. I don't really know how many being exported.
Snakes on a plane, Mark. Snakes on a plane.
Snakes on a plane. Ed. Snakes on a plane. Okay.
Yeah, I never had a case like that.
I'm learning more and more about, basically these animals, these reptiles, they're currency. Their eggs, they're currency. Like anything else, it's contraband, it's currency. Like narcotics, money, it's all the same. But
the markups for those things outside of this country make them exceedingly lucrative.
Yeah, that's the numbers that he gave us. If the prosecutor wasn't exaggerating, were it was better money than drug money. It was drug money, basically, the same type of figures we're talking about.
Wow.
Now, and the weird thing is
but I agree with you on one part, Mark. The surrender part, like that's just stupid. I mean, if you're going to surrender,
you know, Ed, there's a couple of you know, I don't need to name a name. Anybody who's a lawyer in this town that does criminal work knows who I'm talking about, so I don't need to name him. But there is a federal judge out of Broward who will not allow somebody who has either pled guilty or been found guilty of any charge. It doesn't matter what the nature of the charge is. They will not allow a surrender. Everybody goes into custody at the moment of the pronouncement of guilt, which is really unheard of, unless, you know, you've got a violent or dangerous or a flight risk, which most, you know, the vast majority of the people in the federal system are just not. Some of them are. And for those, obviously, you take your precautions. But, you know, when you have a gentle giant, somebody who's accused of a financial crime, who's not a flight risk, somebody who's not a violent offender, somebody without a significant criminal history, et cetera, normally, especially if it's a guilty plea, right? The person stands in front of the judge, says, I'm guilty, does his allocution, and, you know, spills his guts, his mea culpa, and the judge says, fine, I'll see you in 6 weeks for sentencing. So this judge takes everybody into custody. The one thing you can say about him is he's consistent. Right. Nobody doesn't get taken into custody. Well, that was the position of this particular U.S. attorney. His posture was, hey, if your guy wants to cooperate, we'll be happy to negotiate with him. But if he's not cooperating, we're not cooperating, and we're not going to give you a heads up unless it happens to be convenient.
Okay, now, just hear me. Let's say, God forbid, something happens. They go to arrest the guy. Somebody discharges a weapon. Somebody's killed and everything. You know,
a neighbor.
And here's the headline. Man shot by police accidentally for breeding illegal python eggs.
Or man shoots cop for breeding python eggs.
Well, now we told our client, look, they can be coming for you whenever they want. Okay, we're going to have to play this game. And we're not talking about DEA. We're not talking about FBI. We're not talking about ATF.
Homeland Security.
We're not, you know, and this is
NSA, Mark. It's not the NSA.
But Fish and Wildlife Agency, this is not their wheelhouse.
No, it is not. They're the worst. Listen, I'm not afraid to say it.
Aren't there some bald eagles out there to protect? Doesn't somebody have to worry about like bald eagles or grizzly bears or something?
They probably are the way they are because they feel very insecure because they know that everybody in law enforcement doesn't.
It's the prosecutor that's telling them to go pick them up. These guys probably don't want to suit up and have to worry about.
Well, you know, especially if they know that there's a lawyer willing to surrender the individual. It's hard to believe that the agents would not be eager for that to occur.
Look, it is just stupid on so many ways.
It's not safe.
Example, you turn them in, right? We've done it. We've all done it 100 times. So let's explain to the audience what happens. Cops call, client calls me, says, hey, the cops want to talk to me. Don't go talk to them without a lawyer. Let me call them first. Hey, are you going to arrest my client? Hey, your client needs to be arrested. Okay, no problem. I'll be there on, let's say today's Tuesday. We can turn them in tomorrow. Can we meet at the TGK? Can we meet at the actual jail? Have all your paperwork ready. Have your reports ready. The cops can have 2 days to draft everything. We all show up to TGK. We all have coffee. It's all nice and dandy. I got my bondsman ready to bond them out quickly.
I was just going to point that.
Paperwork ready. It's just so much easier to do it this way. It's just stupid not to do it
this way. It's safer. Nobody's in danger when you're kicking doors down.
The only reason to not do it is if there's a compelling reason not to do it. If you need the element of surprise, if you have some concern, if it's necessary to send the HRT team in. But under normal circumstances, when you've got attorneys,
they've already told us your client's going to be taken. So it's not like it's a surprise.
Right.
The whole thing is it's punitive. All it is punitive.
We already know they're going to be arrested. We're just turning them in. We're bringing them to you rather than you come to us.
It's like, you know what? We should just deliver him one day anyways, Mike, and leave him on the doorstep of the U.S. Attorney's office.
Like a baby at the fire station.
Hey,
exactly.
There he is.
A little basket.
Stay here in a fucking tent until you guys take him into custody.
Listen, it's the never ending, the never-ending situation where you think after doing this for 30 years, you've seen everything, and bam, another first just comes and hits you right in the face. So, that's one nice thing for those of you who are thinking about a career in the law. There's repetition, but there's always new and exciting frontiers to be traversed. So,
and look, for a lot of the people that my followers that I talk to on TikTok, it's a fact. We're not even going to deny it. If you have good representation, if you spend money on a good attorney, okay, these are the details that get taken care of for you. You don't want to be sitting around going, gee, oh my God, are the police going to come tonight to get me? Are they going to come tomorrow? Are they going to come to work? Are they going to come to my daughter's soccer game?
Mark, how about this one? What was it, about 2 weeks ago? I get a call at 8:00 at night from a former client's spouse who says the police have my husband in the parking lot and he's going to get arrested. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. Listen, there's nothing I can do to stop that from happening, but let me give you the name and number of my bondsman so that you have somebody to reach out to and keep me in the loop and let me know. And then about an hour and a half later, I get a call from the client himself. And I'm like, hey, well, what's going on? He says, nothing, man. I go, where are you? He goes, I'm at home. And I'm like, what are you doing at home? I thought your wife told me that you were with the police and you were getting arrested. He said, oh, yeah, I am getting arrested, but I'm here with the police. I said, well, what are they doing in your house? He says, well, I let him in. I go, what do you mean you let him in? He goes, well, they told me they were going to get a warrant anyhow, so I might as well let him in and just make it easier. And so now,
how many times have you heard that, Ed?
Mind you,
yeah, right?
Mind you that they're allowing him to call me because I'm assuming that they're assuming that this is all. Once I know what's going on at this point, I'm going to be supportive and try and encourage him to work with them so that they can get cooperation, etc. Because they're already there, right?
They just didn't know who you were, Michael.
In the meantime, I say to him, all right, listen, I don't know that I'm on speakerphone at the time, but I say to him, what department are they with? And I hear them in the background responding. Okay, so now I know I'm on speakerphone, and they say, oh, we're with the DEA, and we're with Metro Dade, we're the task force. I said, okay. I said, they didn't get a warrant? He says, no. I said, well, why did you let them in your apartment? He says, well, because they told me they were going to get one anyhow. I said, so why are you doing your job for them? Did they give you a badge? Did they deputize you? I mean, are you getting any benefit out of this? He says, no. I said, well, then you need to stop now. And I hear them in the background now jawing. I said, he goes, what do you mean stop? I go, revoke consent and tell them to leave and get a warrant. He goes, can I do that? I go, yeah, you can do that. You should have done it in the first place, but you could certainly do it now. And before he could answer, they're still jawing in the background. I hear fumbling on the phone and it disconnects. That's it. So this was about 9:15 at night. He gets booked into the jail at 8:30 the next morning because they did go get a warrant and it took them all freaking night to do it. They had to sit there and suffer through it. And because they had to do that, they gave him a booking tax. They charged him with a bunch of offenses that didn't exist. They strung them together and put him in charges that have no bond holds to force him to fight to get out. Fortunately, we have an excellent bond judge here that does Monday through Friday, and she's just wonderful, and she's, done tens, if not hundreds of thousands of these cases, and I didn't really have to say too much because she read the writing on the wall and, for what it was. But, these are the types of things that happen, and, another lawyer maybe would have said to the client, all right, you know what, they're already in your apartment, you've already begun to cooperate, you've already, tendered controlled substances to them. If you stop now, you're going to throw a monkey wrench in their machinery and they're going to get really, really, really angry. And we don't want that. So let's cooperate and then try and negotiate with those detectives to cut a deal that they have no authority to cut. Right?
But I'll tell you something that one of the benefits of being a former prosecutor, especially in a special unit, I don't know if this happened to you, Mark. I'm sure it has. I had a case once where my client gets arrested for a simple possession of marijuana, but he got arrested by narcotics guys. Now, I know they thought they were going to his house to find a grow. They didn't find a grow. They found, a sizable amount of marijuana, a felony amount of marijuana, but it wasn't a trafficking amount. But the narcotics sergeant put on the arrest affidavit, hold no bond. And I know what they did because we were in narcotics. They used to do that when they wanted you to be a flip or they wanted you to be a confidential informant. So He's calling me. He's freaking out. His family's all freaking out that he's got no bond and how's he going to get out? And I said, don't worry about it. I said, I know this guy. So I called the sergeant up. He was one of the guys that I worked with when I was at the unit. Called him up. He goes, hey, Ed, how have you been? I haven't talked to you forever. I said, hey, I'm good. I'm good. Listen, I just got hired by, John Smith. First words out of his mouth. Ah, shit. I said, come on, man. I know what you're doing. You know it ain't going to happen. We didn't even have to talk. It was all cryptic. He goes, yeah, I know. You're not going to let him flip. I go, he doesn't have to. You know there's going to be a probation plea. He goes, yeah, all right, don't worry about it. I'll forget about the case. So does that happen to you sometimes, Mark? One of the nice things.
When was the last row house you've seen in Miami? Or they disappeared because they all went to Colorado, Washington, California. That's where the grows are, and they just transport it back here now. But that was a big thing. But when I was in narcotics, it was 93. And we were getting we were getting like 10, 15, 20 break cases. The cocaine was falling out of the sky still. Okay.
Yeah, but we were getting grow houses when I was there too.
My first year in 91, that's when the Falcone and Magluta trial was going on down the street, and everybody in the state state attorney's office had an ear on what was going on over there. So I was sort of introduced to, that whole situation and how cocaine, look, Miami's still a cocaine city. Always was, always is, always probably will be. And, do we see any meth cases here?
I've seen them.
Okay, we see them, but we don't see meth labs exploding here. We don't see an epidemic. Why is that, Ed? Because the cocaine, the cartels that still exist, the corporate cartels, they keep meth out of South Florida for the most part.
Yeah,
there's just
except that you and I have now hit on 2 meth cases in the last month.
But they're not, they're possession, maybe an ounce.
Right,
we're not talking about trafficking.
Right. They're not a meth lab.
They're both trafficking, but they're not manufacture.
Right.
They're only trafficking because of the weight.
Right.
It just,
because meth amphetamine becomes trafficking at a half an ounce. That's why. So it's a small threshold.
If you go to some of these conferences and some of these other states with other criminal defense attorneys, you go to a place like, I don't know, Missouri or something, their problem is meth. They give a shit about cocaine. It's meth of fentanyl.
Well, fentanyl has now been a problem for us. You and I just had a client not too long ago who had the cocaine that they took from him tested positive for fentanyl. And so they charged him with fentanyl trafficking because it's a much lower threshold in terms of
it could have had this much fentanyl in it, and it could have been an ounce of cocaine. You get charged with the fentanyl.
And part of the problem with that is that, this guy obviously had no idea that there was fentanyl. He knew he had coke. That's what he expected. But he did not expect fentanyl to be in it. It's certainly not what he wanted. And this is part of the problem that we have now with our porous, the way the drugs are coming in now with heavy fentanyl cut. It's a big problem for people. I mean, not just life and death, but also in terms of charges, because
you'll be lucky if you make it to court and not dying first. Okay. I mean, this guy, like I said, it wasn't even a lot, and they jammed him up. This is one of these cases, Ed, where they served a warrant on his apartment, thinking he was the biggest, drug dealer in the neighborhood and everything. He get, a couple of little seals of weed. I mean, like thumb. I think he had maybe 2 grams of cocaine in total, and then what they thought was fentanyl was maybe like a little less than an 8-ball, and that was it.
But as we all know, unfortunately, the way the law is written here in the state of Florida, if there's any amount of it in any composition, then you're responsible for the full weight. So, there could be a minuscule amount of fentanyl in a heap of cocaine, and just because that little teeny bit of fentanyl is in there, the weight of the coke is what you're going to be charged with the fentanyl. And then good luck fighting that, because it's a mixture, any mixture thereof, right?
Correct. If it's been commingled,
your hands are in the hands of the lab. The laboratory doesn't lie. They'll send you back their lab report, and they'll tell you exactly what it is.
Correct. Which is another thing. Have you guys seen, like when I was there, Mark, I'm sure when you were there, you guys probably did it the same way. We never filed any drug cases until we got the report back from the lab.
How can you?
Have you seen how many cases? I've had a bunch of them. I'm like, I had a case when we were on the verge of trial and they still hadn't taken the cocaine to the lab. And I'm like, and you know what it was? I don't mind telling you. It was Helen Page. She was the division chief of the case. She was in narcotics. And I looked at her and go, Helen, how are you letting this go to trial? You guys haven't even gone to the lab yet. She's like, don't tell me how to do
And,
it.
Was it
you know,
how is it filed? Because you have,
I'm not.
I mean, presumptive. You can do a presumptive marijuana. You know, remember that law? You can smell marijuana, whatever that bullshit was.
No, yeah, I agree, of course.
But you can't do.
we,
How
as
do you
a
do
rule-
weight? How do you presumptively? Okay, I don't get. I don't know.
Bro, that's what
Listen,
I wanted to know.
Ed, it's worse than that. Mark and I just had a case a couple of weeks ago where we got an attempted murder charge dismissed. They never even interviewed the victim in the case. The cops
said
never
that, yeah.
interviewed him. The state attorney never interviewed him. Nobody ever spoke to this man. They had no idea what his version of events was or what occurred, yet they charged the case.
But here's why what I'm talking about bothers me more. When I was in narcotics, and Mark, you were there a little bit before me, so that the audience understands, you were there a couple of years before me. We used to give a training once a month. The narcotics unit trained the pit prosecutors once a month. And these are some of the things we used to go over. We used to tell them, listen, because we saw the drug cases first, even the possession ones. But we used to tell them, if something slips through the cracks and we send it to you, don't file until you get a report back from the lab. So it's not, it goes beyond just maybe one prosecutor not understanding. I mean, are they not training this anymore?
They're not
Why-
training them. Yeah. There's no training. There's no training whatsoever.
There never was. There never really was.
There was when Reed Rubin was running the show, and then David Weinstein and Kennedy. They're all at the U.S. They all went to the U.S. Attorney's office. These are some of the top narcotics prosecutors in the country. So things were a lot different back then. If you didn't do things by the book, you're done and you're out.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's just some of this stuff. I
Well,
really
there's
don't
nothing
understand.
going on, Ed. That's the problem. There's nothing going on. They don't know. These guys, I had a reverse sting out of Hialeah. It was a joke. They were just stealing money. They were, they're cowboys. They knew they didn't have a good reverse. They just wanted to steal the money, which they did. And then I had trafficking was bound down to some money laundering bullshit charge, which I don't even know how they'll prove that. So it's a lot of times, you know how it is now. The police are just simply looking for seizure, money, property, and they are cowboys. And that's what
But you
they
can
do.
get it back.
And
I
they
mean,
rob.
listen, if they fuck up, there's a forfeiture laws. You can get it back. And some of those judges over there are really good about it. If you get one, call me. I'm telling you.
Well,
They're
if you
really
bring
good about
16, if you bring 16,000 to an undercover warehouse in Hialeah, and you say that you weren't there to use it to buy the drugs that the cops were bringing with them, there's not a lot of judges that give you
Yeah,
back
you
the
might be
16
screwed.
grand. But
You might be screwed on that one.
But the 70-year-old woman.
On the
who's
other
a
hand,
boat
you
that they
might
were
have just
making
been
into a pot trailer. She should get her boat back.
Yeah, on the other hand, you might just be a passenger in a vehicle carrying the cash on your way to the Hard Rock to go double it.
Me. Or on the other hand, I had a case where they took $240,000 from my client. You ready for this one? I'm gonna tell you the end of the story before I tell you how it all started.
Did he have it in hundreds or small bills, Ed, first?
All kinds, brother. All kinds. So he allegedly was getting AIDS medication. He was buying listen to this. Apparently, there's a big market for buying AIDS medication from prostitutes who don't use the medication, but you buy it off of them and then sell it on the black market. This guy was making a lot of money doing that. So they ended up going to his house. They found all the meds. They found the meds in the living room, and they found $240 something, almost $250,000 in his bedroom cash, which Mark will tell you there's really no nexus from that, right? But Mark, you know what he did do for them? Because he was such a nice guy, he wanted to help them out. He gave a signed confession saying that the entire $240,000 came from the drug sales of the AIDS. I guess he wanted to help out. So
wait, was that his hand working by itself, or did he have one of the agent's hands, like doing
no, but I will say this. Wait, but I will say this. They had a couple of problems. Number one, the handwriting was really bad. So I asked my client, I said, dude, I don't mean to insult you or anything, but this looks like a third grader wrote. He goes, well, I couldn't write well because I was cuffed. You were writing cuffed, okay? So, but here's the rub. Andy was on probation, which Mark and Michael can tell you, for you guys who don't know, when you're on probation, they can go into your house. They don't need a warrant to come into your house.
Lights out. Yeah.
Right. So, but here was the problem. There were 4 narcotics officers eating in a restaurant, and they saw my client park in the handicap zone, and he got out, no problem. So they just decided on their own to fuck with him. So they came out and they asked him for his driver's license, and he had it in his wallet. Then they asked him for his registration, and when he went into the car to get the registration, they said they searched him for officer safety. So I called them up. And his previous lawyer told him, forget it. You're not getting the money back. There's no way you're getting the money back. But I called up Miami-Dade Legal, and I said, listen, let's cut to the chase. The way I see it is, if I go and guard you, the only issue is going to be, did your officers have a right to do everything they did after the stop? Because if it was the handicap, they're only allowed to ask him for his driver's license. They were not allowed to ask him for his registration. So everything they saw in the car, my argument's going to be, that's fruit of the poisonous tree. Everything from that moment on has to be dismissed. You're going to argue your argument, and it's a 50-50 shot. She says, yeah, I agree with that. I said,
wait,
so
how come he doesn't have to show the registration there?
You don't. With a handicap, you do not have to show the registration. Your driver's license number is attached to the handicap placard. So all you got to do is show your driver's license. They're not allowed to ask you why you have a handicap. They're not allowed to get into
I know that.
history. Nothing. All they're allowed to do is you show
Well, it's a
the
good
ID.
thing for you, Ed.
So I said to her, the way I see it is a 50-50 shot. Let's just call it a day. Give me half of it back right now, today. And I won't file anything. We don't go to court. She said, all right, give me a minute. I'll call you back. She called me back 15 minutes later and said, all right, fine. We'll give you half back. She gave me half of the 250
What
back.
city was that?
That was Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade police. So sometimes if you can argue successfully, doesn't matter that they had a right to seize it. You could just argue like criminal, that they had no right to get to that point. They didn't have the probable cause to get to that point. You get the money back.
So
But these guys were bringing it in a bag, and the cocaine was on the table.
I didn't say it works all the time, Mark. I'm just saying
I want to draw handicap placard, cocaine on table.
We'll do another show on fruits of the poisonous tree, but we're at the 3:00 mark, and I am sorry that we didn't get to talk about some other cases, because I would have liked to have given a few more war stories, but still I think it was a fun and productive discussion about some wild things that we've experienced and some real current stuff that's going on right now. So
we got
we got some people watching on TikTok. I'm gonna have you guys come over on TikTok, and it's easier there. We split screen, and people can come and go and watch. They can interact, send us questions as we're talking. So we'll do this, and we'll pick it up. I'm sure I'm gonna go live and answer some questions right now and get some feedback. So I'll share it with you guys when I get it. I see that we're coming down. So you guys promote your next show. I want to thank you for having me as your guest. Spending time with you two fuckheads in the afternoon on a Monday afternoon wasn't so as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, just remember this: it's better in the Bahamas, man.
It always is, and we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to go back there
at some point.
How do you get to the Bahamas these days?
Before we go, though, Mike, I want to give one pro tip, because Mike and I like to give pro tips as much as possible. One pro tip, on a serious note, you've heard how we've talked. You've heard the interaction. I don't know about you guys, but I always tell people, look, if you're going to hire a lawyer, hire one that's really going to be able to do something for you. If you don't have the money, you really can't hire a really good lawyer, just stay with the PD. The PDs have some very good lawyers. They're overwhelmed. They've got a lot of cases. Yeah, but if you can't afford a lawyer like Mark or myself or Mike, the reason you're hiring us is not only our knowledge, we have fewer cases, so we can really invest the time and energy on your case. If you don't have just stay with a PD, man. They're good. Save the money. Don't waste your money with guys that are not going to be able to help you.
Let me just add one thing to that before we sign off. What we've done now, this conversation, just so the folks know, another pro tip, this is something that we do with great frequency in the real world as regards our current cases.
Right.
whether Mark and I are working on a case or not, we will powwow about the case.
All the
We'll
time.
call Martinez and talk to him about it to get another idea and another vantage prism perspective. So
Mike,
these types of scenarios are very helpful for the client.
all the time.
So it really is a plus plus. I say, you know, when you hire me, you're not just really, you are hiring me to be your guy. I'm the guy who's going to be responsible on paper. I'm the guy who's going to be responsible for court. But you're going to get a team that comes with me because I'm going to go to Mark and I'm going to go to Ed and I'm going to go to people who I trust to give me, you know, either whatever thoughts they might have, however they may spin out on any given case.
Let me, if I may, let me add briefly to it because we're already at the 1 hour. How many times have I called you, Michael, and said, Mike, I'm going to ask you a stupid question because I know the answer, but I don't understand how the prosecutor or the judge is doing this. And then you're like, yeah, Ed, you're 100% correct. We talk to each other even when we know what the answer is because you never know. I might be missing something.
And
Michael might be missing something.
And sometimes we're able to come up with an end around because we look at it from a different vantage point too, which is kind of nice. Even though you think you're now backed up against the corner and all of a sudden you found an out. All right, listen, we'll sign off. I want to thank everybody for watching episode 17. It's hard to believe that we've done this many shows already. Next week will be 18. And hopefully, Mark, you'll come back and give us some more war stories and we can have a little more fun for the folks. Everybody,
good,
thank
guys.
you again.
Good to see
I
both of
appreciate
you.
it. Be good.
Good to see both of you guys. Take care.
Bye, guys.